Welcome to Poland Daily History with me, Nicholas Richardson. In this series of episodes, we're going to be looking at Polish history from a British perspective and also Anglo-Polish relations in a geopolitical context. And I'm delighted to have with me in the studio today Richard Berkeley, who is half Polish. He's been living in Poland for 20 years and is able to bring a unique perspective onto this subject. But maybe if we could just now, we've been in detail, we could just sort of look more broadly, I think, at the...
Well, you did ask me about music, and the thing was, just to interrupt you,
yes, of course,
that my great-grandfather, the one who was in Siberia and then went back to study with Lichtenstein, he founded the Krakow Choral Society, and was a great friend of Paderewski, and was very, very influential in the field of music. And in fact, the Emperor of Austria asked him to write a history of music in the provinces and of the Austrian Empire, because Joseph II Franz Joseph was extremely interested in the music of Chopin, and we have correspondence from him and my great grandfather analysing, various Chopin works. The Emperor was extremely interested in this. My great grandfather had a rather dim view of music in Poland. He felt that after Chopin there was absolutely nothing of any worth at all, and this made him very unpopular because I do feel that we have a lot in common, he and I, because he would let his views be heard, and there was a famous concert in 1889 where he played the Chopin concerto or something under a composer called Żeliński, who was also a conductor, and only a week before that my grandfather had denounced Żeliński as a sort of rotten, useless, worthless composer. And so that concert must have been rather fiery, I think.
Yes, rather tense.
Rather tense. But he founded, this quite, and I think the Philharmonic also in Krakow. But he was also my grandfather, who was this very strange character, who, when he was a student, had a visiting card advertising himself as a false witness at trials, and as a second. He would stand second to anybody.
Oh, marvellous.
No, he was a terrific fellow, actually. He also defecated on the altar steps of the Mariacka church to show his disapproval of the Catholic Church. So he was a difficult chap to have as a son, I think, probably.
Very, by the sounds of it.
But one of his most interesting entries in his diaries was in, I think, around 1907. He had to go to the railway station to pick up some Russian visitors for his father. And there was a Mr. and Mrs. Trotsky and Lenin who came to see my grandfather, who they thought had particular insight into the situation in Russia, having been a prisoner in Siberia and actually, having actually had some influence when he was there, even though he was very young, mainly because he was involved in the sale of Alaska to the Americans because he spoke English.
Right.
In 1866 or 7, I think it was. Yes. And so he had, but he was actually, Lenin was barking up the wrong tree because my great grandfather wasn't particularly interested in overthrowing the Russian regime.
No. Well, I think that brings us to a good point, I think, when we talk about regimes and countries. If we may just sort of review, go back a bit deeper into history.
Yeah.
And look at the first sort of Anglo-Polish contacts, which is, from my remembrance, really, if we go back to the 16th century, it's all about trade in the early days, I think.
Well, trade was the great thing, and of course trade and religion. I mean, I had an argument with a Russian director who I was working with the other day, who was talking mystically about Hamlet. And of course, from the Russian point of view, Hamlet is mystical. But I mean, from the Anglo-Saxon point of view, it's not. It's a very practical document. Denmark and England were allies in the religious wars. They were Protestant countries. King James's wife was Anne of Denmark. Shakespeare knew Elsinore. English actors.
And if we go back a bit earlier, am I right? Was it King Canute who had a Polish wife, or am I getting or a Polish mother, or am I getting completely mixed up?
The Ottomans had Polish mothers. I mean, Suleiman the Great had a Polish mother.
I mean, so that's quite interesting. That's probably the earliest of my recollections of sort of Anglo-Polish affairs.
But of course, these relationships were solidified with trade, and Danzig was a Hanseatic port.
Indeed.
Now,
Indeed.
Danzig was not Polish, it was German, or German-speaking, But the surrounding countryside was inhabited by people of the fields, the Poles, who were Polish. Well, they probably didn't know what they were, actually. They didn't really care what they were.
No.
But they was Polish-speaking.
Or probably Kashubians in that day.
Kashubians and all sorts of people like that.
Yes, exactly.
You know, I mean, see, that's the great thing that we find so hard to understand.
Well, because we come
have
from
an island.
We
We're an
come
island
from an
people.
island, so our borders have been set since time
Well, it is
immemorial.
inhabited by four fairly warlike tribes, actually. But fundamentally, we know who we are because of our geography. And geography plays a great...
I say geography plays a great part in Poland.
Well, because it's flat. I mean, it's like it's the worst possible place to start a country, actually, because it's like a sort of thoroughfare between one mountain range and another.
Exactly.
Yes.
And so it funnels the activity.
It funnels the activity.
In this sort of broad...
Yes,
this broad,
and
wide,
the trade routes
open,
are all going east-west,
strip.
really. Well, except that's not true quite, because, I mean, the Italians were trading a lot with Krakow and so on. But my first... I would immediately think about, the Protestant revolution in the 16th century, where cities like Pinchów, for example, down near Krakow, was one of the 4 great centres of Protestant publishing in the 16th century, and that influence remains. It's quite extraordinary. I don't know if you've ever been to Pinchów.
I haven't.
But it was. There were a lot of Italians there, because of course the Italians were the builders. You know, even the.
Well, that's clear in Krakow as well. You see
absolutely.
the Italian
Well, I mean,
architecture.
Queen Bona, she didn't just bring, basic vegetables to Poland, like the onion, but she also brought Protestant thinking. Now, she never converted to Protestantism, but many of her advisors were Protestants, and of course this had a great influence on the great Polish families like the Leszczynskis and the Radziwiłł, who all converted at some time or another to Protestantism.